from hell.
All right, this is Ryan Fellman. The Path to Manliness here, joined by Chief Chuck, and we're already laughing. We're already having a good time. So, uh, Chief Chuck, go ahead and introduce yourself however you like.
Sure, man.
I don't even think you need an introduction. I think most people know who
Uh,
you are.
I don't know, man. I'm no AJ Cortez or anybody like that. I don't have Lambos in a mansion, and I don't have any of that. But no, I appreciate you having me on, man. We've been trying to do this, and I just keep
Yeah.
forgetting because I'm old. But we
No,
finally
you're
made it
good.
happen. No, hey, yeah. I'm Chuck Whitworth, a retired Navy chief. I did 24 years in the Navy. I was a P3 flight engineer for most of that. Got about 5,000 flight hours in a P3 Orion up in the front, but I was also a maintenance guy, and I did some carrier time. And before that, I was in the Army for 2 years. It's not necessarily a secret. It's not a well-known fact on Twitter that I did 2 years in the Army. I got out of the Army because I was tired of camping out for a living. So I decided I wanted to fly, and so that's how I got in the Navy. But other than that, man, I'm just a real simple dude that grew up in the hills of North Georgia. Old background, Southern background, raised, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, please, thank you. You fear in the order of things in life that you feared your father's belt and your mother's tongue and your God. Those three things in that order. It's just, started hanging around. I'm an old dude on Twitter. In Twitter years, I'm like, I don't know. I think I'm like 1,433 in Twitter years. But I'm 55 in real life. So,
Yeah.
but no, it's been great. Meeting up with guys like you, Huntsman, Garrett, the Aion group that we've got a corner of. So,
Yeah, we've got a good group. It's a shame there's not more older people. A lot of guys, I think, you didn't grow up with Twitter, so it's
mhm.
not familiar and it's kind of hard to get into. Whereas us younger guys, it seems more natural. Although I didn't really use Twitter for quite a while. I had an account, I never really used it. But
Yeah.
it's nice to meet you and Billy Red Horse, both of you guys stuck out to me
Yeah.
right away.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of guys offering insight and wisdom from a pretty full life like you've lived.
Yeah. I mean, I started off, I guess a few years ago, I started doing probably when my kid got old enough to do computer stuff, people were
Yeah,
talking about Facebook, so I got on Facebook and all that. And then, just like everything else, as soon as the older people started coming to Facebook, all the kids left. I vaguely remember MySpace being a thing, but I never did that. Because
neither.
really, I was out of the country that most of the time that time, but I guess it was about a year and a half ago that I got tired of Facebook, man. And it was just, and if you people, I know you're on Facebook, and a lot of people we are,
Yeah,
but it just got to be so freaking ridiculous.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, people that aren't on Facebook that are on Twitter, you think Twitter becomes an echo chamber and it's just full of crap. You really should go over to Facebook and watch what happens there. I mean, it is it just became one of those things to where I got tired of it. So I first thought that Twitter, man, you associated Twitter with, celebrities,
yeah.
movie stars, companies, stuff like that. So when I was like, you know what? A friend of mine was tweeting, and he's a minister. We went to high school together. And so I started following him, and then I kind of like, man, I just don't know about this thing because, I'll put something out there and, you got no response for a while because I think I had like 3 people following me. And, so I drifted away, but then I came back and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to use it to pick up on current events, find out what's going on, follow some celebrities and follow some new stuff. And then, believe it or not, I saw a tweet from Ed Lattimore because I've always been big into self-improvement and leadership. And so I started learning what hashtags would do. And so I started searching on stuff, and an Ed Lattimore tweet popped up, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool, man. This guy. And so, you know, I said, oh, you can reply to these things. That's cool. So I replied to it, and, you know, it kind of replied back, and some people, next thing you know, started following. And I was like, wow. So I was like, well, this is pretty cool. And so, you know, you start, well, you start learning how the ropes are. You
Right.
know, who's Ed following? Well, I'll go follow this person. So that led me to Alexander, and that led me to some other people. And then, you know, it just exponentially from there. And so then I was like, well, you know what? I'll throw some stuff out there. I'll tweet. And I did, and, you know, I got some engagement, and, you know, there after a while, it was like, holy cow, man. I looked down and it was like, wow, I got 100 followers. I was like, there's 100 people out there that care what I say. I didn't know at the time that 94 of those were these automated bots and advertisers. But, you know, that dopamine rush we talk about was,
It still counts.
yeah, man, you know, so we did that. But yeah, and then somebody found out about my personal side, and they're like, how old are you? I was like, well, you know, at the time I was like, I'm 54 and all that. And they're like, you know what, you really ought to check this guy out. You know, the gentleman missed it. Okay. So I did, and started following with Billy, and we started engaging. And honestly, before I had a couple hundred followers, that's where I discovered the magic of Twitter.
Yeah.
And the magic of Twitter was Billy and I had this exchange long enough, and he goes, hey man, why don't you, you know, here's a number. Why don't you give me a call if you want to talk sometime?
That's great.
Okay. Yeah. And so, you know, it just led from one thing to another. And then, you know, he goes, follow these guys. I followed 50 people, all this stuff. And so, you know, you know how it goes. You get to that point,
Yeah.
To where, you know, Tanai, you know, I followed
Mm-hmm.
Tanai, and the next thing I know, I'm at a conference in Atlanta, and Billy's like, well, I live in the area, you know, we got to do dinner. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, do you mind if I invite, you know, TJ? I was like, sure. And, you know, so we met and had dinner, and that's, to me, that was the defining moment of where Twitter was so cool, was these guys that you'd interacted with online.
Yeah.
We're sitting having dinner for 2-3 hours, and we're laughing and talking, and it's like we had known each other forever. And then we start doing these Zoom things, you know, with Garrett and all that. So yeah, I think what we bring, Billy and myself, you know, and now it's you see how it is. Max Panzer, you wouldn't know by looking at Max that Max is a gray wave guy. Dennis Himes, you know, these guys. I think it took me a little bit to get into the groove of accepting that role as a more or less a tribal elder, you know. And at first I was very reluctant, because in my mind I don't feel like I've earned that title and that honor, and I don't feel like I'm that old. But
They call that imposter syndrome. I think everybody struggles with that at some point. You know, I struggled with it for a long time. You know, I originally had a different account, and Billy followed me on that one. Actually, Billy Redhorse is like one of the first, like, you know, well-known personalities to connect with me. And then I started this account it was kind of my burner account, because I found myself wanting to say things, and I didn't feel comfortable saying it for my main account, so I started saying it on this account. And
right.
at the time, it was a nod. And then I come to find out pretty quickly that people like to hear you actually open up and speak the truth and speak what you want to say. So that was my first big lesson, and it's been instrumental in my growth. Is that it's hard to do at first, but just opening up and sharing what you know, what wisdom. Even if you think it's stupid, these things that you think it's obvious, it's not obvious to everybody, and you forget,
Right.
you know, where you were when you were younger, or when you didn't know these things. And you know, that's what guys like Billy Redhorse and you bring to the table. It's all these things you probably take for granted. And, you know, young guys like us, even if we know it, it's kind of nice to just be reassured sometimes by somebody that's, you know, a little wiser and, you know, more knowledgeable about whether it's going to work or it's not going to work, or, you know, what makes you an honorable man, you know, stuff
Yeah.
like that. We respect a guy that's been in the Navy, a guy that's older, a guy that's got a family. You know, it says a lot.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we'd like to say, I mean, for us, Billy and I kind of laugh about it, and you know, you guys have some of the same experiences we have, and we tell people, and we tell the younger men, especially because that's our niche area.
Right.
But I'll mentor anyone, but we tell young men, it's like Billy, Dennis, Billy, myself, Max, Texas Dom, a lot of these guys, it's not that we're any smarter than y'all. And it's just that, you guys have had some experiences where you got your ass kicked and you're learning from it. We've just had our ass kicked a lot more times than y'all have. That's really the only difference. And
Yeah, those are the best teaching moments.
exactly, and and to be honest with you, Ryan, that's a key point that I try to get across to these young men. That's why I tweet it sometimes. It's like, I will not do the work for you. I will hold my hand out. I will throw you a rope. I'm there for you.
Yeah.
I will not do the work for you, because, and it's not to be mean, and it's not to just to blow you off, but there's some things that you just absolutely have to. There's paths you have to walk yourself. I can show you where the path is. I can tell you what's on the other side of that path. I can probably tell you what's going to jump out of the woods at you on your walk. I'm not going to walk with you and hold your hand.
Yeah, most guys get stuck in that learning stage. They're so afraid of failure. They just want to keep, stacking skills and learning all this stuff, and they want to get ready and wait for the market to be in the right moment. They're afraid the market's saturated or it's not the right time. They're always making these excuses, but even if it doesn't work out, if you go out there and just try something, you're going to learn a lot. I mean, the first time I made a website, I remember I sent some link to somebody and they responded back. Unfortunately, he was a nice guy. He's like, "Hey man, you got some dead links on your page." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, okay." So I start looking around and just clicking buttons randomly. I'm like, "Yeah, that didn't go anywhere, did it?" So you just got to learn by trial by fire, and
you do.
You learn so much quicker that way.
Well, I learned that. I learned it in the Navy as part of the whole leadership continuum that I've now come to realize years later that my leadership continuum probably started from the time I was 6 years old, when I first started with Cub Scouts and with Little League Baseball. You start from there, but it's like at this point, being a program manager for the government for a multi-million dollars worth of resource, and with a semi-large team that I'm responsible for, I tell them all the time, and it's the same lesson I tell everybody, same lesson I turn. And just like you mentioned, we'll sit there and someone will have an idea, and I go, okay, let's try it.
Yeah.
And I will inevitably get well, that was my idea, but well, I'm afraid of it. Well, what about this? Or no, what if that doesn't work like that? And I'll sit there and I'll let them go through this, and then I go, okay, stop. This is how you analyze. And I don't care. You're right. I don't care if you're investing in the market, if you're buying Bitcoin, if you're trying to learn a new recipe, you're learning a new skill, whatever.
Right.
Always evaluate it by this metric. It's like, okay, if I do this, am I going to kill anybody? That's first and foremost. Is there a chance of injury or death of a serious nature to myself or anyone around me? That's first and foremost. So if it's not that, then you go, have I adequately analyzed and evaluated the risk versus the reward? And after that, understand there's always going to be risk in everything. If you're doing it, there's going to be risk. You can't avoid it. You can only, what is it they teach in risk management? You can either accept it, mitigate it, manage it, or ignore it and hope it goes away. And that's always the worst solution. So understand, accept that risk, but be willing to say to yourself, I'm comfortable with this risk. And then eventually, I tell them, you can die on the vine of paralysis by analysis. At some point, you have to stop thinking and you have to execute. So Let's try it. Let's try it. Well, Chuck, if we try it, we might lose. We might waste this many hours and this much money and manpower. Okay, I'm the manager. That's my job. If I'm willing to accept that risk, there's nothing we can't recover. We can always recover this. So get in there and try. And I think that's what I see a lot of on Twitter with the younger guys. They sit there and they watch all the gurus and they say, well, I'm going to spend 24 hours out of every 3 days reading on the proper form and technique to doing a bench press and a bicep curl.
Yeah.
Jesus fucking Christ. Eventually, dude, you got to go pick the metal up. Just pick the bar up.
I forget. I've heard a couple people say this. I don't know who first said it, but I love the advice given to people that don't know how to go to the gym. Just go to the gym and lift heavy shit, or lift things and put them back down. You know, it's that simple.
It's not hard.
Yeah.
And I see that more and more. I mean, in the reckless days of my youth, in the early days of having, just that cocksureness and that bravado of,
right.
Fucking, I'm a pirate, man. I'm going to go do this. And you go fling yourself off into doing whatever. There's been many times that I've come dragging my monkey ass back with my tail between my legs, beat up and scarred up. And my mentors at the time and my leaders at the time, they'd sit there and kind of get a big chuckle out of it and look at me and go, well, what did we learn? And you sit and go, and at the time I'd be like, well, Chief, here's what I got out of that. And they're like, all right, bet you won't do that again, will you? Nope.
Yeah, right.
All right, did we learn something? Yep. Then pick your head up, put your ass back in your britches and get on about your business. You're all right. You're going to be fine. You got skinned up. You either physically or emotionally from your ego or something. But you just keep on and keep picking up and moving. So you're right. I mean, it all comes down. That's what I try to do with my advice to young men is, I love hearing your plans, but what are you going to do with it? And I tell a story. I got to teach a leadership class not too long ago, and I told a story about all of these great, these concepts we have now with our education. Young men and women like to think, and they like to plan, and they like to I'm going to make a linear fishbone chart. I'm going to do a fishbone diagram. And then I'm going to do a pie chart. And then I'm going to do a Kanzai moment. And then we're going to have a walkthrough. And then we're going to do, and it's like, Jesus Christ. I'm like, do you guys realize that in the midst of World War II, we went from, hey, we think we can build a bomb that will absolutely fry half of fucking Japan in one shot. What do you guys think? Yeah, I think we can do it. We went from that conversation to dropping an atomic bomb in about 4 years.
Yeah.
And so I tell leadership classes that I teach now, I'm like, take that timeline of 4 years and this is what they accomplished in that 4-year timeline. And then now lay it against your timelines of today. We can't get an environmental impact study on the mating habits of the Eastern Appalachian darter snail in less than 4 years. So, and I kind of lay that up there to go, this is my point, and this is my analogy to you, that you can get so wrapped up in the planning and you can get so wrapped up in the analysis that by the time you get done, everything is OBE, as we call it in the military, overcome by events, that it's no longer relevant. So then you become what I lovingly refer to is the situation has now become a self-licking ice cream cone. Because it's just, this is all we're doing. We're doing this.
Yeah.
The dog is chasing the tail, whatever you want to call it. But in your own personal life too, you can do the same thing where you sit there with a budget, with how do you do money? How do you do, I think you put out a tweet earlier today for all your email, the shiny things. Oh my God, dude. I read that email today and I was like, oh my God, I want to take this email and I want to print it out and I want to take it and paste it on dudes' heads.
Yeah. And I've been on
every day.
I've been on both ends of that spectrum. When I first graduated, I had a decent chunk of change and I went out and bought a shiny new car. And, it was great. I traveled a lot for work. I used the hell out of it. And honestly, looking back on it, it kind of wasn't the worst deal because it lasted like, I think 7 or 8 years and I actually sold it. So it's still driving. And it never broke down like more than once. I think I had like one issue. But then I started thinking, like, man, I could have taken that money and I could have invested it here or
Mm-hmm.
there and done so many better things with it. You know, the economist in me kind of like gets eat up by it. And I had a moment of clarity when I had an impromptu moment where I bought a old Jeep Wrangler off of a friend of mine for like $1,500. Now he gave it to me for a really good deal.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm driving this thing around. And I'm like, I'm having more fun driving this beat up old Jeep than I ever did in that $38,000 SUV. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Yeah.
like, what do I care if it's, you know, brand new and shiny?
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. So the crux of the email was these young guys. They lust after, you know, the Lambos and the Ferraris and all those. Like, you got to be making a lot of money to justify buying a Ferrari. Because even if you've got $500,000 and you want to buy a $200,000 car, I mean, you could buy a house. You could go travel the world. You could buy security. I mean, that will give
Yeah.
you peace of mind for, I mean, forever for some people, depending on what your cost of livings are. So,
Well, and I think, you know, the thing that I like about that too is, you know, as insightful as an email as it was, and you're
thank
right,
you.
it's nothing. This is just a regurgitation of things that we've all been taught and should have been taught. And
Yeah.
you know, I got taught early on because I had an old crusty chief who, you know, he literally blew his money every payday on Budweiser and unfiltered Camels and hookers. So I mean, it's a hell of a life. I mean, this is old Navy. You don't do that anymore. But the guy he kind of told me, he goes, you know, he was one of those great people that I use as an example now, that even a bad person can be a good teacher. And this chief was a case in that. And he would tell me, Chuck, don't want to be like me. He goes, listen, he goes, you're a young sailor. He goes, and the guy, you'd picture, I mean, you can picture him, man. He's sitting there, he's an old crusty chief, bunch of tattoos, smoking
Yeah.
unfiltered cigarettes, smells like booze half the day. But the guy was smart as a whip because he would sit down, and this was before Excel spreadsheets. So this guy could do it on a piece of paper with a stubby pencil, and he drew something out, and he goes, all right, how much do you make here every 2 weeks, shipmate? And, you know, I told him, I remember at the time it was pennies, you know, it was like $400 or $500 every 2 weeks. And so he starts doing it, got this stubby pencil, and he's doing this stuff. And I'm like, he's like, shut up. And he's doing this, and he goes, all right, shipmate. And he hands me this piece of paper, and he goes, if you were smart, and you're not, he goes, because none of us are at your age, he goes, but if you were smart, he goes, out of that $500 every 2 weeks, he goes, I know this sounds like a lot. He goes, if you take $100 every 2 weeks, that's $200 a month. And at the time, you could still buy savings bonds. And that was really encouraged in the Navy, was to buy savings bonds, because at that time, we were still guaranteed a retirement. We didn't have thrift savings plan, which is the government 401k.
Yeah.
We didn't have all that.
Yeah.
So
bond rates were kind of decent back then.
They were.
Now they're like 2%, which is okay.
Well, I mean, yeah, at the time, you know, because they would tell you, he goes, if you take, but you know, just like you've seen, and I think you've even talked about it, is if you take that $100 that's $200 a month,
right? And
you put it just in just a low yield, like you said, 2%. When I was, you know, 20 years old, he goes, if you can do that every payday for the rest of your time in the Navy, you know, he did the figure, and he goes, dude, at the time, he goes, you're going to have like $60,000 at the end of a 20-year career. He goes, and it was, you pay, he goes, the point is, he goes, pay yourself first.
Right. Yeah.
He goes, you're going to run up bills. He goes, he goes, now, he goes, knowing you and knowing all the rest of you moon dicks running around here, he goes, you're going to blow me off. He goes, and you're still going to go out and you're going to buy that freaking Mustang from the used car lot right outside the car, out the Navy base. And you guys are going to get, and the first thing they're going to ask you is, what kind of payments would you like to make? Not how much the car is, what kind of payment. And they're going to back you into one of them 21% interest car loans that you're going to be so upside down on. And that's the point. And so I tried it. Even to this day, I told my son this, and I still tell the young guys and young ladies that work for me. I'm like, look, you work for the government now, or you're in the Navy, man, take this money and put it in your thrift savings plan. And we have different blocks. Maybe it was you talking about, maybe it was somebody else I read. It's kind of like the funds you can put in that, you know, they have various risk things. And It's basically a money management fund.
Yeah.
And
Index
so,
fund or an
yeah,
ETF. Sure.
exactly.
It
That's
was
what
in
they
the
do.
email.
That's what they do with us with TSP.
Yeah.
And so for like me, I'm in TSP now with the government. I can they automatically match. They automatically take out 3%, match 3%. I can put in up to 6%, and they'll match me up to 6%, and then I can put in up to as much as something like 15% until I hit the tax limit for non pre-tax contribution.
Yeah.
But I tell these kids, I was like, dude, you're like 27 years old, you're out of college. Go with the riskiest thing there is, man.
Yeah. I wish more people would say that to me, because when I was growing, or when I was in my 20s, I had a decent chunk of change. I got lucky enough to have like a good chunk of change. They gave me a little tiny bonus, but like at the time it was like a gargantuan amount of money to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept asking people, and everyone's like, "Oh, just play it safe, put it in your savings." But this is a post 2008 world. It's quantitative easing. There was no savings. It was earning
Right.
quarters. Like literally pennies and quarters. Looking back on it, I should have invested in like fuck anything.
Yeah.
You know, I I wish I would have invested in the shit that I was like using. I'm like, all right, I use Amazon all the time. Maybe I should invest in these guys. They seem to know what's going on, and that stock has gone up like I think 500% since then. So
Yeah. Exactly.
$1,000 would be $5,000 today or whatever. And you can do that if you're young because you have time to recover it. If you put your money into, I love this. This is one of my favorite stats. It does not get told enough because it's so simple. Since 1930 to today, if you put your money into the S&P 500, it'll earn you 7% every year
Mm-hmm.
on average. Now, the tricky part is not to freak out when you lose like 30% one year, because
Yeah.
it's going to come back, and just keep buying in.
Well, you're right, and
Um,
that's what I tell these young kids. I was like, go with the government. I mean, because they they block these out for you, and they have these advisors. That this is what they do. They're paid financial advisors for the government that work
mhm.
for a savings plan. That their whole job is to come around and advise military and government civilians. And so I tell them, I was like, go talk to these fools. I was like, you at 27, putting in 3%, 4%, you can be as risky as you want to be right now. And I tell them the exact same thing. I was like, don't be, and I see it all the time as government workers. God almighty. I was like, you don't want to be that dude that's sitting over there on his lunch hour and he's logged into his TSP and he's hitting refresh every 7 minutes. And then he's got Google up in the corner and he's watching the stock market ticker and he's losing his shit every time something happens. I was like, my TSP, I don't watch the stock market because I don't care.
Right.
I don't watch my investment. I don't care. There's somebody paid to manage that. I have a mix. Even at 55, I can still do a little bit of risk, but I
Right.
have some more the more assured things, treasuries, bonds, stuff like that. But I'm also drawing a military retirement. I'm 7 years away from drawing a second government retirement and then selling my shit to a contractor at the highest price, as a consultant, which will reel me another third retire. I mean, I'm not going to run out of money, but the cool thing is I don't say that to be arrogant. I say that to be assured of the fact that I have arranged it so that I'm not going to run out of money. And that's the thing is telling these young folks and young men and women it all goes back to where we started with this is, hey, understand the risk and then do something. But you're
Yeah.
right. You'll see people to be like, well, my grandpa told me that if I'll save in a savings account, I tell him, I'm like, dude, you were tripping over $5 bills to
Yeah.
grab a dime.
Yeah, and they're actually losing money
Yeah,
because the money is being printed so fast, the rate of inflation. If you're not earning about 4% a year on average, you're actually losing money. So there's no savings account that's going to get you more than 4% right now. I think the highest is like 2.35.
oh,
And
if you're lucky.
those are the online banks. You got to go to like Ally,
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. Something else you mentioned earlier before I forget. You
Sure.
you mentioned they would match your retirement. So like the military, a lot of corporate jobs will do this too, where the employer will match what you put into your 401k or
Mm-hmm.
retirement fund or whatever. So like if they are offering 100% match or even a 50% match on like say the first 2% that you put in, and you don't put at least that much in, I mean you are literally burning cash.
You are.
Yeah, so I mean if 2% is like maybe it's only $200 a month,
Yeah.
adds up. It's $2,400 a year, and if they're going to match 100% of that, that's $2,400 that you could have in your retirement fund if you put it
Yeah,
in there. And
it is, and it's guaranteed. I mean,
God,
and the thing about it, if you're a government employee or if you're military, because we both have the same thrift
right?
savings plan. I mean, the thing is guaranteed. I mean, you're not the money that you put in up to the base, which is 3%. That money is safe and guaranteed and insured. You will always get that money back. It can't. It's just by law. It
Here's
can't.
here's one that my audience will like. By law, if your wife decides to divorce you because she likes the pool boy more than you, they can't come after your 401k. It's
Correct.
untouchable.
Correct. And that's again, and that's just the value of I tell people all the time, and we did it too. My wife and I went. I was fortunate that a chief that I was stationed with and flew with, he was on my crew for a while. We're good friends. He got out of the Navy and he retired, and he became, well, even while we were in the Navy, he was a command financial specialist. Money was his hobby, analyzing investments,
Yeah.
stuff like that. It was a hobby. And he got out of the Navy and got his certifications and all this. And then now he works for Thrift Savings Plan here in DC. And, he came down and, I took Jim to lunch one day, and he sat down with me and my wife, and he goes, "Hey," he goes, "look, dude," he laid it, he built me a binder. He laid it all out for me. He goes, "This is what you should do." And he told us all these ins and outs of it. And so I took that and turned around and showed my coworkers. I'm like, "Look, why aren't you doing this?" And then, I told other chiefs, I'm like, "You need to be telling your troops that, especially these young sailors, 22 years old, man, you're first coming to the Navy. Like you said, it's 3% for them. The government, because here's how it works. They're going to take, for your retirement now, they're going to take 3% base out of your pay automatically. It comes out pre-tax. But they're going to match that 3%. Like you said, that's 100% match. So there's 6%. And then you can elect to go up. And for me, I
And if you
have
can,
to.
you should. Yeah. I mean, I'm
Well,
putting I think 8% of my into a 401k right now,
I tell you what, man, right now, I mean,
or an
this
IRA.
sounds bad when I say it this way, but because of the way the laws are structured, the tax code structured, and all this stuff, right now I max out FSA, the federal savings account, the health savings account. I have to max that out. I have to max out TSP. My wife has multiple Roth IRA. We have anything that's pre-taxable, because if not, they eat my ass alive because they've
Yeah.
reduced all the deductions, and it's just, I mean, the tax would eat my ass alive.
Yeah. If I don't know, my generation, for some reason, they're not as astute as your generation was. I'll bash the millennials a little bit here when it comes to taxes, because I have so few friends that go to an accountant. It blows my mind. And some of these guys are making good money. I mean, if you're making minimum wage, that's one thing. But if you're making like a decent amount of money, you need to be paying your accountant, because they're going to save you that money. You're just like, what, $400 on your, a
Yeah.
W-2 and maybe a 1099. Your taxes are most likely not that complicated. Mine are
Well,
complicated
yeah.
as shit because of all
Well,
the
I tell
things that I do.
people it's
And it's
like the
still only
tax
like
code.
$700 for me, but it's going to be way
Yeah.
cheaper for everybody else.
Look, man, the thing you're absolutely right about. I mean, the tax code is what, 37,000 pages long?
Literally, no one has ever read it.
Exactly.
It's
Even the
that
people
big.
that passed it don't. Even the
Yeah.
IRS doesn't know.
Well, yeah.
But here's the thing, and I tell these guys all the time, man, is like, if you don't think that the government will come get you, I was like, because it's just like anything else. When they owe you money, they'll take their sweet ass time paying you. But when you owe them money,
They're
they're
pretty
gonna
quick.
come get you, man. And
They
I hear people still go, "Well, I just won't pay any tax."
they'll
All right,
get you.
don't.
I got audited last year. It was an honest mistake. I didn't mean to, and I fixed it. But it was, man, every time an IRS letter showed up in my mail, like my heart skipped a beat for a second. So you just don't know, and it's, you can fight a lot of battles, but the IRS is always a losing battle. And
I tell you what, man. Here, you want to hear a cool story?
I do.
about tax. This is cool.
A cool story about taxes by Chief Chuck here.
Man, I was still on active duty, and I was married previously, and my ex-wife was she was an accountant by civilian trade, and she went into the Navy as a reservist and all that. And side subtext to that is, I told her, I was like, well, you can do this military stuff part time as a reservist. It'll be a little income for you, and it'll be something fun to do. you won't make much out of it. Well, she's a fucking admiral now. So, but anyhow, we were sitting there and we'd gotten divorced, and I was stationed in New Orleans, and I get a call, man, that they're like, "Hey, investigator wants to talk to you," and I'm like, "Okay." And I was like, well, I don't think I'm up for my security clearance yet, but whatever, man. I don't keep up with that shit. They tell me when I got to go do this. So I go up in the freaking conference room and close the door, and this person flashes these credentials. Hey, I'm so-and-so, and I'm from the Internal Revenue Service. I'm like, whoa. I'm just a lowly E6 in the military, man. I haven't been. And they're like, no. We're here
What's an E6 again?
It was a first-class petty officer.
Okay.
It's the enlisted rank. It's
right.
It's really, you don't make a whole lot of money.
Right.
So I was sitting there, and so the investigator goes, "No, hey man, look, we're here to do a background investigation." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And they're like, "Were you married to X?" Yeah, I was. Okay, we need to have a chat. And I'm like, "Okay, do you mind me asking why?" They're like, "Well, she's applied for a job at the Internal Revenue Service as a armed IRS agent."
Wow.
And so we had to do, full background. She'll be top secret clearing, all that. Okay, yeah, man. So, I mean, it wasn't a bad breakup, and it wasn't vindictive, and I didn't talk to her. So I answered their questions honestly. And so we got done with the interview, and I said, well, isn't that something? This is every guy's worst nightmare, that your ex-wife is now a gun-toting agent for the IRS. Investigator kind of sat there, and she laughed. She goes, you know what, Mr. Whitworth? She goes, you actually don't realize it, but you've got the goose that laid the golden egg. I'm like, I don't understand. She goes, not that you'd ever have to. She goes, but in the event that you ever got a serious audit, she goes, we can't. Because all you'd have to do is claim that your ex-wife had a vendetta out against you. And I was like, so you mean to tell me that I'll never get audited by the IRS? She goes, no, I can't tell you that. And I can't promise you that. She goes, you may very well get picked for an audit. But what I'm telling you is you need to bring this fact up if you ever are audited. And I'm like, well, how about that, man? I was like, but I mean, I didn't go off and do anything stupid, but
right.
It's just one of those things where you realize that it's like, wow, man, some of the shit that goes on in this world with with what happens, it's funny.
Yeah, it is funny. People talk about like how high school is a popularity contest, and I'm like, what do we magically change when we graduate? It's still a popularity contest, just to different degrees.
It is, man. But you know what? And I tell you, I know this wasn't supposed to be the Ryan and Chuck finance show.
That's what's supposed to be anything. That's what I never know what's going to happen.
There's a few other things that we'll talk about that ought to be a hoot. But I mean, I learned a lesson when we went to buy the house that we have in Maryland. We were fortunate. We owned a house in New Orleans that we were actually able to pay off and do a lot of good investments. And then we paid off our house through good luck and good fortune. We paid off our house in New Orleans. In Pennsylvania when we moved up there. And then when we got ready to move down here, we had to get a mortgage because of the size of the house and all that. And so we were going, and I learned a very, very big lesson about debt. And I know a lot of people preach about no debt, no debt, no debt. Well, you need to manage your debt, and there needs to be some form of, there is good debt, because we sat down, because I was raised in a certain manner of, you save money, you pay your bills, you pay off all your bills, and you're not in debt to anybody. Well, we go to sit down and get this mortgage for this thing, and I already own a house that's paid off that's worth $200-something thousand in Pennsylvania. We have no car payment, minimum credit card, but we pay that off every month. And my wife and I both had 800 plus credit scores. We're thinking, no problem. We go to sit down, and they go, well, there's a little problem.
Yeah.
You're quite the risk, Mr. Whitworth. I'm like, excuse me? How am I a credit risk? And they're like, well, because you pay off all your bills, you save money, and you're not in any debt. And I'm like, and in what universe, bizarro world did this become abnormal and bad? And the guy, he looked me straight in the eye. He goes, you're right. He goes, you were probably told by your grandfather and your father that this is the American way and this is what a good, solid American man does, right? I'm like, yep. He goes, well, He goes, that's not quite how it works. He goes, we consider that a risk now because you've got all of this disposable asset and income. He goes, who's to say you don't lose your shit one day and you go off and you start buying that Lambo, that mansion, the Learjet, He goes, then you overextend yourself and we can't guarantee. He goes, you've got no record of having a debt that you had to pay. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I did have a debt. I paid it off. He goes, doesn't help you. That's not what we want to see. I'm like, holy shit. So I was like, so you're telling me that I need to have bills out the ass to be able to get a loan to have another bill? He goes, exactly.
Yeah.
I was like, do you understand how stupid that sounds? He goes, I do. He goes, but that's just the way it works right now. So, I mean, I don't know what the current advice is on that, but
I think that's pretty current. That happened to me recently, a few years ago. So I had a very cush corporate job, but I wasn't making a ton of money. I was making good money. It's not a lot. And I go to buy a house, right? And let's just say we'll say in factors. So they wanted me to buy like a house that was 7 times my income.
Mm-hmm.
Or something like that, or more. They said maybe even 8 times. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, all right, first off, I'm a single dude, no kids. How much house do I need? Second off, you're going to own the house in like 6 months if I buy this stupid thing, this stupid ass loan. So then I made the smart decision and bought a significantly cheaper house, like something like 2.5 times my income or 3 times my income. And a couple years later, I don't have that corporate job anymore, and my income is all over the fucking place. But it's good.
Mm-hmm.
It's way better. But it was like there was a month where I think I made like $1,000, and there was like months where I'd make like multiples of that. And I got shot down by multiple banks. Like I went to like 4 or 5 different banks, and I literally could not buy a house. And I had to get my dad to co-sign, even though my income had like almost tripled. But they just won't do it. It's just the way it works. And that was my hard lesson on that too. Now I've had enough years to prove my income, which is also kind of a weird thing. But again, I want to buy a house, and they just kept like, you need to buy a bigger house. You need to buy more house. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
At what point is it enough? Like, if I make $30 million a year, do I have to buy the, $20 million house? I mean, shit.
Well, I mean, on their scale, you do. Right. And I think it's, but I mean, and to more the practical side is, you can swing it the other side. And we were talking, my wife and I were talking, and we always like to say those fucking millennials now, even though, our
I
kid
still
is,
say it, and I am one.
Yeah. I mean, our kid is, I don't know, he's 24. So yeah, I guess he technically is, but
I think he's borderline.
But we see it now because it and here's where it caught us is, my wife and I, you see me tweet all the time. We go to amusement parks, we go to Cedar Point, all this, and we go to all these amusement parks, but, he's gone, we've got the income now, we go and blow. But the thing we notice is we see it at all of these parks, staying at nicer hotels than we stay at, and just blowing through money. You go to these amusement parks, and I'll buy my kid a $15, waffle cone, and I'll buy him a $10 Mickey sippy cup thing. And, my wife and I are going back out to the car and eating, cheese sandwiches and all that. But that's just because we like to keep our money. But, it's, we constantly see it in our neighbors too that are younger. They've got 4 or 5 shiny cars. They're living in this nice neighborhood in this nice house. How do they do all this stuff? And they're up to debt. They're up to their ass in debt.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, some of the younger generations now, it's kind of like, hey, we've got this freaking live for the moment thing. We're not going to be like you old fuckers. We're going to be, we'll worry about paying our bills then.
Think about how we grew up, though. When we were young, we weren't even adults yet. We watched a couple of buildings fall down in New York City and planes fall out of the sky. And then we go to college, and despite all that, everyone tells us to go out and get raises and ask for a raise. And we're going to be worth millions one day because we're the most educated, intelligent, class generation ever. And and then this derivative bubble blows up in the financial markets in 2008, and we can't get a fucking job at IHOP.
Yeah.
And I think it's just kind of weighed on us, our whole generation. It's hard for me to say because I've had a pretty good run of it. I got lucky in some of the decisions I made. Mostly I interviewed very well on one of my jobs, and I got hired at a company that maybe I shouldn't have been hired at, but I did. And I think it leads into a lot of our binge drinking and our anxiety and all those things. And it's just a different world, and it's complicated. But you're right. A lot of people do burn through it, and there's definitely this obsession with living in the now. You want to talk peak living in the now? I used to live near Carmel, Indiana. I didn't live in Carmel, Indiana, but Carmel, Indiana, or if you're from there, Carmel, because they're preposterously obnoxious and very ostentatious. These people think they're hot shit, and it's like one of the nicest cities to live in the country. It's a really nice place. But I knew this lady that was cleaning. She would like clean houses for her side job, and I mean, it wasn't like one or two of these. Multiple houses she would go to. She would go in and clean, and she loved it. And I'm like, why do you love cleaning these rich people houses so much? She goes, well, there's no furniture. I'm like, come
Right.
again? She goes, they don't have any furniture in their house. Like, why don't these people that have $500,000 homes and $600,000 homes have why would they not have any furniture? She goes, well, what they do is they'll have a big party every 2 or 3 months or so. They'll rent the nicest, fanciest furniture, go get like a big old flat screen, have this huge party, show off, and then they return it. And then they do it again 6 months later, and they show off the new stuff that they bought. They're just constantly competing with each other, but they're all doing the same thing, which is the hilarious part. Like, it's not like there was one or two families that are doing it. It's like almost all these houses are just putting on for show. I mean, what a horrible way to live. I mean, you don't actually get to enjoy it.
Well, and we saw that in Pennsylvania. We finally, I moved the family up there in 2005, and it was all we were up in the Allentown area, and so all of the families from New York and New Jersey that were selling high, coming over, getting the balloon payments and the balloon mortgages before the mortgage bubble, buying 10 times the house they could afford. And we walk to our neighbor's house and introduce ourselves, and you meet them. You look in their windows and there's nothing in there, but they got a house, and they go back to the city and they tell their friends living in, the little houses in the city or the apartments, showing them pictures that are nice, beautiful, 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath house out in the suburbs and the hills of mountains of Pennsylvania. But I think, you're right to a point is, I kind of give a hard time about, some of the anxiety driven of your generation. I mean, it gets to the point to where it's like, almost like, and I thought about this a lot. It used to be with me, that grumpy old Clint Eastwood guy's like, you freaking pussies, you're anxious, we're all anxious. But then I realized, I got to thinking on this, and the 9/11 thing is a good thing, not a good thing, but it's a good point in that we certainly had bad things happen when I was growing up. I was born in 1963. I remember vaguely, that the little southern town we were living in, that was segregated. The black section was on the other side of town. I was a young man. My dad was a volunteer fireman. Small town of 2,000 people. Everybody did something. But when Martin Luther King got shot and killed, there were riots to a point. And that whole turbulent time of the mid-'60s, I was a year old when JFK got shot, and then civil rights leading into Vietnam. It was turbulent times, and it was certainly bad things. But I think the difference between the two, to compare and contrast, and I think this may even be a good email or an article or a tweet thing to do between me, you, Ross, a couple other people, and Garrett, is I can contrast the two, because you sit there and you look at two events on a timeline. And the difference comes is the gap we have in our generation of why I go, you freaking sissy millennials, and you guys go, dude, this massively bad thing happened. Is in 1963, my mom stayed at home with me and raised me. My dad worked. we had Walter Cronkite who came on for 20 minutes a night, and that was all the news you got to see.
Yeah.
The paper came on Sunday. The local paper came once a week, but the big Atlanta papers came on Sunday. And as a kid, your dad read the paper on Sunday. I got the comic section because as a young kid, that's all I really needed to know. And so we grew up, and they did their job of what they thought was isolating and protecting us from the bad shit.
Yeah.
You grow up and you learn about it through history. And history, the victors write the history books. So the history that you learn is always going to be skewed one way or the other. Now we go forward in time to your generation, and probably the pivotal moment since Pearl Harbor happens with 9/11. And where are we at in this generation now? Okay, so now in your generation, most of you, and I say not you, but you as a collective, most of you were latchkey kids. Both your parents worked because they either had to, or, mom wanted her career, dad wanted his career. Hey, you got the Xbox and the PlayStation and all this, and come and let yourself in, watch MTV Raps or whatever, play video games and heat up your pizza rolls. But then you also were born, you guys were born after the 24-hour news cycle started, to where we had this constant barrage of CNN and then Fox News, and then the internet comes along, and it goes from, having to do broadband dial-up and go, you got mail. Now it's instantly on your phone. It's on your computers. Everywhere you turn, you were just bombarded with shit. And so this tragic, freaking mind-altering event happens. And you're right. Nobody was there to insulate you guys, and nobody had you had to. You were on the front line with us, watching it as it happened. So I think that kind of, not to make excuses for anybody's behavior on one side or the other, for us to look at you guys and go, you freaking sissies, or for you guys to sit there and look at us, you fucking boomers. You're the ones that ruined our environment and all this other stuff. I think it's important to look at those two separate events on a timeline, but look at the timeline and look at how our culture and our mores changed over those 40 years. I think that's important. So
yeah, I think it's huge. I think it shapes you, all that stuff. I was fortunate. I had the 1950s upbringing that you had.
Mm-hmm.
I was just lucky that my father had a high paying job. My mom was kind of old fashioned, and they were pretty happy that way.
Yeah.
And I think it gave me a tremendous advantage over other kids. I think I went to school day one as a kindergartner, smarter than the other kids. And I think I was always a few steps ahead of everybody, and I never let up. And I owe her a lot of gratitude for that. And I owe both my parents a lot of gratitude for that. But yeah, it was weird growing up. I'm 32, so I'm a millennial, but I don't associate myself with a lot of the millennial issues because, like, I grew up with the phone, but at the same time, like, my phone was a phone. It didn't really do anything else. And, we still had just enough, like, leniency where we could get out and get in trouble and sneak into a house that, may or may not have been ours and wasn't completely built yet, and go out and drink or whatever. We got to experience. I don't think these young kids are doing that anymore. I've been reading this book called Aion. This is probably like the third time I've mentioned this on this podcast. But it's talking about how these young kids today are growing up, like, not doing any of these things. And not to say that kids should go out and drink and do dangerous shit like that, but they're not even getting their driver's license. So, I don't know. I want to see what your perspective was on that. Like, what do you think's changed since, like, when you grew up versus what these kids are growing up now? I mean, they feel like incredibly more sheltered than ever before. But it also seems like they don't want to rebel, which is strange to me.
Well, you're right. And my wife and I saw this over not just raising our son, but bringing him into, scouting. And that's a whole nother show for me to get on my rant about Boy Scouts. But watching kids grow up through that, you're right. I mean, when I grew up, I was old enough to go out and play, at 6 years old, 7 years old. So that would have been 1970. In the summertime, you literally, it's just like you've heard about in the summertime, you're out of school, You get up, you eat breakfast, have a bowl of cereal, your mom kicks you out of the house, and you're not expected to be seen back in the house until the street light comes on. And so you get on your bike, and you and your friends would run and roam. And I mean, we were playing in sewage creeks and damming them up. We were tying firecrackers to cats' tails. We were building forts in the woods, I mean,
Yeah.
and, you could really, if you wanted to know where everybody was, you would sit there and look where all the bikes were laying in the yard. But it was also in a small town too. You had the opportunity. I mean, it was a given at noon. Whoever's house you're at, your mom's going to bring out a bunch of cheese sandwiches and peanut butter sandwiches and Kool-Aid. And that's just where you ate at the time. And, I grew up with you'd fall down and, your dad would look at you and he's like, I don't see any blood, guts, or feathers sticking out of you. So he put that orange mercurochrome methylate on you that burns like hell. And you patch up and you move on. And, we played Little League Baseball, and you know what? Sometimes you didn't make the team. You got cut. You didn't make the team.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you lost, and you didn't get ice cream, and you didn't get the trophy. And I think what happened is over the years going, like you said, to now is a lot of it was a bunch of parents that decided that my kid's not going to grow up the way I grew up.
Yeah.
And then we got an influx of some of these other cultures, and that's not to say that's a bad thing, but just some of these other ideas of, different psychological musings and theories of, oh my God, we're killing the self-esteem of the child. Every child is important. So now when we go play soccer, everybody's going to get a participation trophy because you're all special. So that led to the entitled generation of going, well, I'm special. I've been told my whole life I'm special. What do you mean I didn't get the job when I interviewed it? What do you mean I didn't get the job? What do you mean I didn't get the promotion? And then it escalates again to where my child's not going to do that. And so then it becomes, I think it became a race to where we're all so consumed with what we all do is the kids today were given, basically, I call it a payoff. Hey, dad or mom will be your pal. Here's a new iPhone. I can't do that this weekend with you, but I'll get you the newest, bestest game, and I'm your buddy.
Yeah.
And so we kind of went from a shift from being parents sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, to we were really more concerned about being our child's best friend.
Yeah.
And it kind of hurt because we want to, if you get to that point to where when your relationship is that tight and it's so compressed into time that you're going to protect that child at all costs. My wife's a substitute teacher. She's seen it in the schools to where if I got a bad grade and my parents had to go see the teacher with me, you could best bet your butt I'm getting my ass chewed when I leave. But now you'll have parents that come and will scream at the teacher, what do you mean my child got a bad grade? My child couldn't possibly do this. And so the children have become so insulated in this little cocoon, and some of it's technology, and some of it's just parenting of not wanting to be the bad guy and pull the cord at a certain amount of time and go, hey, Junior, go outside and play. Well, and granted, I know people listening and people that see this later are going to be like, okay, so you're going to turn your child loose on the street today and he gets picked up in a van by a meth head and he gets taken and dumped in the river. Absolutely. I understand the dangers out there, but the dangers have always been out there. The dangers will always be out there. You have to be a little more vigilant. You don't need to be as I call it, you don't need to be a helicopter parent. You need to be an air traffic control parent.
Yeah.
You don't need to be over the top of them. You just need to be watching them on the runway and be ready to take action when something happens.
Yeah, it used to be like Stranger Things where the kids just roam the streets like wild. Now maybe it's they stay in your front yard. They stay in the backyard.
Exactly.
I think that's reasonable. I mean, shit, most people have much bigger houses nowadays anyway. I mean, these yards are getting pretty big, so it's not.
And you've got to turn them loose. And I think, and this is almost going full circle back to where we started almost an hour ago with the conversation. Is with your kid, you gotta let them fail sometimes, man.
Yeah.
That's how you learn. You fail, and it's all these lessons that I try to teach people, and all these things about honor. How do you get to the point of living an honorable life? You're going to screw up and do some dishonorable things. That's how you know where your measure is. That's how you know what your baseline is and your boundaries are. sometimes you got to say something at the family reunion that's going to embarrass the family to know that that's the boundary of things you don't say when you're in public. You
Yeah,
don't talk about mom's special toy in the bedroom drawer when Aunt Phyllis is visiting for Christmas. You know, you learn those boundaries.
And you gotta let the kid know. Like, there's a lot of like, I don't want to upset them, or I don't want them to not like me. I think part of the being their friend thing comes from there's so many families now that are divorced and split up that it creates
It does.
we used to have a monopoly, right? Like the nuclear family had a monopoly on raising the kid. Like, we're going to raise the kid this way, and nobody else is going to raise it a different way. Now we've got competition in the marketplace, because you got mom's house, you got dad's house, and maybe somebody's more fun than the other one. And it becomes this weird thing in some cases. I've seen both examples. I've seen where it works fine too. But
Well, we have a personal friend in the family, and they have a son. The son, I know him. I had him in Scotland. They're good friends of ours. But the mom and the dad never married. They grew up. He went spending 1 week at mom's, 1 week at dad's. Dad's a little better off than mom is now, because mom she never got married again and all that. And she's working hard, and she's a single working mother. But we're at the point where this child was, and I still call him, he is truly a manlet. He is a senior in college, and he still it's still my week with mom, and it's my week with dad. And what will blow your mind is he's studying to be a psychiatrist.
oh, Jesus.
So this little asshat's going to go out into the world and try to solve people's problems when he's never even had any problems to solve of his own. So, I mean, I love him to death, but I've told her over and over again, and she goes, Chuck, I wish I could send him just to live with you. Because, I mean, all the scout parents used to say, I wish we could give our kid to live with you and Miss Roseanne, because you ask our son, we were the meanest parents ever. Because I don't take no bullshit, and I teach people how to live life and how to do something useful with your life. And so, I mean, I think that's, you see that's a prime example of what you see is it was the marketing of the parents. Well, dad bought me this game console. Well, mom, she's not going to be the one to say no. She's going to go out and do something. So it's, you're buying back and forth. And trust me, the kids are smart.
They'll play them. Yeah.
Like a freaking violin, man. Yeah. And it happens all the time. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a large part of where we're going. But, can we turn back? Maybe, maybe not. But I think it just becomes that realization that sooner or later, one generation is going to have to say enough is enough. Yeah. And somebody's just going to have to step up and say, hey, look, this is how we're going to do things now. And how do you shift it? I don't know. I think we're on a good path. You're starting to see more and more maturity. I mean, you look at Benji, you look at Garrett, you know, the guys that are younger than you even, the maturity level that they're starting to exhibit gives me great hope.
No, every once in a while I look at those guys, they kind of piss me off, because I think of myself when I was their age, and I'm like, I was a fucking idiot. Like, I could have been, so much farther along if I would have thought to even start a blog or start tweeting or just to build something. I was so concerned with going to work, coming home, drinking, playing games, whatever. I thought it was you work and then you come home and play. It never occurred to me that I could do this kind of stuff. And I looked into it a couple of times. I thought about how can I get into blogging, but I never made the first step. And then one day I did. The big catalyst for me was my divorce, just going through all that shit. It felt like my whole life was falling apart. I'm like, man, when I get through all this shit, I'm doing everything.
Well, and that's a great point too. And you look over the course of a lifetime.
Yeah.
There's always those defining moments. And I was having this conversation with a coworker, and we were talking, and I'm like, my defining moment out of all of the moments I've had in my life, I've had a lot of really, really good moments. I was like, but what shifted our mindset, my wife and I, was her battle with breast cancer. And that's why I tweeted earlier, when I tweeted about, I don't do Pink October for various reasons, but, that was one of those things when you come to it usually takes some cataclysmic event in our lives to take you by the head and twist you and go this way. This is what's important. And it's funny because how many times have you gone to a funeral, a memorial service, or a wake, a divorce party, whatever, and somebody, some tragic event for somebody, and you go, life's too short. I bet that person didn't know when they got up that morning that was going to be the last time
Yeah.
they took a really good long pee first thing in the morning. They didn't know that was going to be their last one. And so we go, we're not going to be like that. And what do we do that next night? We're arguing about some stupid bullshit on Twitter.
Yeah.
We're worried about some stupid thing that we really don't have any control over. It's not going to matter 5 days from now, much less 5 years from now. It's not until life grabs us by the testicles and yanks real hard that gets your attention, and you go, okay, maybe I don't want to be like that. So, that for me, that was what yanked my testicles really hard. And I'm like, look, man, I work really, really hard, and we make a lot of good money. We've had a really good life, and we've worked hard to get here. I'm not going to leave it for my kid to go blow. I love him to death, but he's going to earn his own shit. So it's like, let's go to, we're going to buy a pass to amusement parks, and we're going to go try to ride all 10. And right now we're 7 out of 10 for those keeping score at home. We have ridden 7 out of the 10 of the top 10 world's highest, fastest roller coasters. So, you just make little bucket lists like this, and that's what you do. So, but yeah, that's it took a divorce for you to get you on your path. It took, an illness for my wife to get us on our path. Everybody has that in the moment. Some will come at 20, some won't come until they're 60, some won't come at all. And that's the saddest thing, really, man. If you think about it, Ryan, those are the saddest people in the world, that they're going to get to their deathbed and go, what the fuck was this all about?
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Chuck. I think I've asked this a couple of times. I think I'll ask you if you want, but I think you have to go through that moment. Like I'm not saying it to hit rock bottom. Like my even at like the worst parts of my divorce, it was never rock bottom. I was still, eating pretty good. My life was pretty good. Like I had satellite. I could watch football if I wanted to. It wasn't like anything what an okay day would be if I was living in like Rwanda during the genocide that went on there. But at the same time, it's like I look back at those moments and I'm almost kind of glad it happened. It's because you think about your life before this happened, and I think about, like you said, I was living this like kind of aimless life where I was going to end up, in the grave one day. I was going to look back and I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'd have written about myself. That's something that that should wake people up. Imagine if you had to write your own autobiography today, what would you write about? And if you can't complete that assignment, well, you got some living to do.
Yeah.
Shit. You said you were a P3 flight engineer. I mean, were you flying these things, or?
Flight engineer was basically a third pilot. I didn't really have controls.
But you're
because it was an analog.
P3.
Yeah, it was an analog aircraft. So we had a third guy up front that I was mostly the systems, the aircraft systems. I did fuel transfer, started the engines. Emergency procedures and all that. I shut the engines down for fires if we needed to do that. I did fuel logs. Really just it's the old school analog aircraft third pilot, for more or less, for a good analogy, I guess.
I think that's a huge part of life, is just collecting these little like experiences like that. I mean, that's an incredible adventure that I'll never go on. And I love flying. I've never flown a plane myself, but like I've been obsessed with it since I was a little kid. I wanted to be a fighter pilot like all my life growing up, and then I come to find out like my vision sucks, and I knew that, but I didn't know you had to add 20/20 vision to become a fighter pilot. Shit, there goes that dream. But
it is, and I've been thoroughly blessed, man. I tell people all the time, it's I'm again back to the imposter syndrome. People thank me for my service all the time, and it's.
How does that make you feel? I feel like people that are actually like in the military think it's like a hollow gesture, and they feel kind of annoyed by it. Does that bother you, or do you just not?
Absolutely not. It's not a hollow gesture, and I know that the majority of people that say it,
I think they mean
very
it.
sincere, and they mean it. And it took me a long time to figure out my response to that, because you want to sit there and go, no, really, I should thank you, because, I've been around the world, 4 or 5 times. I've been to the North Pole. I've been to the South Pole. I literally have been all over the world on your dime, on your taxpayer dime. So I really should be thanking you. But besides that too, it's it's hard to relay back to someone that does it. It's hard to relay back just exactly what an honor it is for us to do what we do. For me, there's been, other than being a father and a husband, there's been no greater honor in my life than to be allowed the privilege of wearing a uniform of my country and representing my country around the world. It's a tremendous honor, and it's a tremendous privilege that we don't take very lightly. So when people say, hey, thank you for doing that, you really just, you want to just grab them and go, no, seriously, dude, thank you, man. Thank you for allowing me to do that, man. You let me represent you. And, I was worthy enough at some point at any given time. I was considered worthy enough to give my life for you. So, and that's a tremendous honor that people don't take very lightly. But when you learn how to do, you can't take 30 minutes of their time and explain it to them, obviously, because they'll think you're crazy. So really all we do is I just learned, I still get it. Hey, thank you for service. I go, hey, and I just very simply say, thank you for thinking of us. We appreciate your support, and just want you to know what an honor it is it was for me to serve you, one of my fellow citizens. And you just kind of go from there. But it's very hard. I mean, I was one of those guys. I still have a hard time. I don't wear, the U.S. Navy retired hat and all that, because it's still very hard. Even, God, I retired 12 years ago. Yeah, 2007. Shit. It's still hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that I'm one of those old retired guys, sitting at the bar at the VFW. But I mean, I do go to the VFW, but I mean, it's just, it's hard to wrap your head around sometimes that, to me, it was like, this was the coolest job in the world, man. I mean, I flew along the ocean at 200 feet and 300 knots, slinging ordnance off the airplane. It was a rush, I mean, I'm one of the few, very few people that got to do it. And so really it's kind of, and that's, God, man, you got me into hawking my own shit now. But
yeah, I'm good at getting people talking. No, you're a humble man, Chief, and it's okay to open up.
I finally decided, and this will lead us to the inevitable talk about, we had to mention sanction at some point, as we do on every podcast. I've been very fortunate lately to have several phone conversations with Roman McClay. I've spent a few hours talking to Roman, and he's just exactly, people listening, if you never talked to him or never interacted with Roman, he's even better, cooler than you'd think he would be on the internet. He's very easy to talk to and very, very passionate about what he does. But we talked, and I was like, hey, your story this, story that. And we kind of had this conversation, and he goes, so what did you do, man? And I told him, he goes, Chief, he goes, you want to write? He goes, you got to tell this story, man. He goes, you have the ability to make people, he goes, people trust you. He goes, tell your story, man. He goes, but tell it just like you talk it. He goes, I told him a couple of stories, and he's like, man, I felt like I was in there flying with you.
That's awesome.
He goes, you got to tell that story like that. He goes, Roman kind of keyed me off to what we just talked about. He goes, hey, man, he goes, if you really want to show your gratitude to these people for letting you do this on their dime, he goes, take them on that ride with you, man. He goes, obviously you can't put them in the airplane and do it anymore. He goes, but do the next best thing. He goes, take them on that ride.
People love a story, man.
He goes, don't try to write like Roman McClay. He goes, don't try to write sanction. He goes, because nobody will ever write another sanction. He goes, nor anybody should. He goes, don't worry about editing. He goes, just tell the story.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's kind of why I've kind of gotten back into the bug of, I want to write a book, short or long, whatever it is, but, put you in the airplane flying with me, but I also want you sitting at the bar with me at 4 o'clock in the morning when you realize you got a pre-flight in a few hours and you're going, shit, I got to get back to the base. And, some of the funny things that we did and some of the funny stories that happened. And I want to put you on the ramp pre-flight with me in Puerto Rico when it's 84 degrees at 3 o'clock in the morning and pouring rain and I'm soaking wet and I got a 12-hour flight ahead of me. You know, I want to put everybody into that world, just to take you along and say, hey man, this really was, when it was all said and done, this was really just so freaking cool. And thank you all. But yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that, you know, I try to pay back to people is, I'm a firm believer in, and it's my sacred duty. And this sounds corny when it
No,
comes.
I think the world needs to hear Chief Chuck's story.
It
That's why I've
sounds
had you on here.
corny coming out loud, but I
You're on the
feel like
Pat
it's,
Manliness podcast. We're on number, I think, 19 here. It's flirting with getting kind of serious at this point. So.
no, I mean, it's just, I consider it a duty to pass along my knowledge and try to bring the next generation along up on me, because I am truly standing on the shoulders of giants. And not to infer that I'm a giant myself, but I got big shoulders. I need to put you, I need to put Benji, I need to put Garrett, my son. I need to put all y'all up on my shoulders. And it's not something that, it's not because I need to sell a book on Gumroad, and it's not because I need to sell my 699 how to be an e-guru course. It's not.
We'll put it on Amazon then. You won't make much
Yeah,
money.
you know what I mean? You know, I'm not gonna create a room and charge people $500 to come have dinner with me. All I want to do is I want to bring you fools along, and I want to show you, man. It's like, look, man, this is what it means. In my opinion, this is what it means to be an honorable man. Yeah. This is what it means to be a man of integrity. This is how I want you to conduct yourself. And then when I'm gone in a few years, I want you guys to be grabbing that next generation, and we just keep stacking, and we keep stacking, because it's just so important to me.
Ray Poulard calls that the cultural tapestry.
Yes,
it's trying to like weave these stories together, and you know, at some point it gets lost. You look back a certain number of years, you lose touch with things that happened in the past. But you know, some people get hung up on stories like 9/11 or the bombing of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, but stories much more, you know, insignificant than those can be more significant to us because they're more relatable.
Yeah.
The idea of being able to relate to a single person experience in the Navy. I mean, that's, if I was a young guy, and I've never been in the Navy, so this kind of works out. But if I was a young guy and I don't know anything about the military, and I'm turning 18, I'm trying to decide what the hell I'm going to do, and I see your book, like maybe that nudges me in the right direction, or maybe I'm not the guy for it. I don't know, but
and it will.
Yeah, I think. I don't know. What would you say to guys like, you know, would you tell a young guy today to join the Navy? Would you tell them go to college? I mean, does it depend on who they are?
You know, I mean, I've had a lot of thoughts about this in the discussion. I mean, college per se, I don't know that I would. I don't think it's a bad thing per se. I would tell a young man right now, you're getting ready to graduate high school. First thing I'm going to ask him, instead of, because he gets this question 1,000 times, you know, what is it you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? My question would be, what makes you smile? What makes your heart feel full, man? What is that thing what is your passion? That dude, you know, you may grab an 18-year-old guy that's getting ready to graduate high school, and he may whisper in my ear, you know, hey, you know, Chief, really it's Irish folk dancing. Well, then, dude, you need to go to an artistic college, you know, a Juilliard or something like that you can hone your craft, man. And that's again, you see a lot of articles about it here lately. It's the craftsmanship. What is it? What is your craft? It's not your job. It's not your occupation. It's your craft. You know, some guy may be like, Chief, I want to go in the military because I want to kill people. Okay, well, that's certainly the place to do it. It's sanctioned by law.
It's a lot better than not going to the military to kill people.
Yeah, I mean, however, you know, but on the same note, you tell that guy, okay, you know, killer, you need to understand that the military is 99.9% pure boredom,
right?
Interrupted by very short, brief periods of just pure chaos. So no, you don't get to start just slinging brass down range on the first day, but yeah, okay. Or, what are you interested? Dude, I'm chief. I'm really interested in aviation. Okay, well, yeah, the military is a step to that. But then again, so is Embry-Riddle Aeronautical College. What are you tied up for?
Yeah.
Do you have the discipline? Do you want discipline? Again, it's those things. The military has certainly changed since I came in. It's a smarter, better educated. It's just by leaps and bounds. I mean, because of what we have. So
Moving a lot more towards like the drone warfare and engineering and more
it is. I
nerdy
mean,
stuff. I've got a theory
it is.
that part of the assault on masculinity and the way that they're kind of putting down like the traditional tougher alpha male and kind of you watch pop culture, the nerdy guys, the smart guys, they're becoming like the heroes, the
Mm-hmm.
protagonists. My theory is that it's military indoctrination trying to build the next soldier. We used to want G.I. Joe, now we want Tony Stark.
We do.
I don't know. That's me throwing spaghetti at the wall. I don't know if that sticks or
I
not.
tell you what, man, I won't tell y'all how to get to the link, and I won't tell you how to do it. But if you can figure it out, if you can ever get inside the box and see how the controls are set up for Predator drones, let's just say that it looks very, 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 very similar to a PS4 game controller.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Those things just don't pop up in the culture by accident. And it's not that the military adapts civilian technology to military needs. If you think that's the case, then
it's all about the user interface.
People need to go look up what DARPA is. And if you can figure out what DARPA is, then you'll figure out that most of the stuff that we're doing right now was military technology first. Backed by, I mean, there are true to life Tony Starks out there. And you're right. I mean, we don't need John Wayne with an M1 rifle jumping over a fence, charging, a foxhole. That's not how we fight anymore. We never will again.
Yeah.
The next step, people laugh at Trump's, Space Force. Well, go ahead and laugh, silly, because what's going to happen, man? That's where the next battle is going to come from. And we're already heading that way. And you know what? You read some of this stuff that people like Roman write about with AI. It's almost scary to the point of, you guys are foreseeing stuff. But I think that the military now is still at its core needs those young men. There's always going to be people that have to maintain the drones. There's going to be people that have to change the circuit cards. There's going to have to be somebody to cook the meals. There's going to have to be somebody to work on the air conditioning of the building that houses the drones. So for a young man today, you need to figure out, do you want to do this? Do you want to work with your trade? Do you want to learn on a trade and work with your hands? Do you want to sit behind a keyboard and punch button? What is it you want to do? There's an avenue for you. College, I have a prediction that in 15 years, I think the traditional walk into the brickyard at Harvard and spend 4 years going to class is going to be done and over with. We're going to do, I've gotten 4 degrees and they've all been online. I've never stepped foot in a classroom. So
I think they'll shorten it. I think it'll become a 2-year degree.
Well, and that too. And I think because what you're seeing more and more of now, because of societal stuff, more and more people are homeschooling their children. Yep. So kids are going to be more and more used to doing things like what we're doing right now with Zoom is talking to an instructor and doing an online curriculum. They're going to be so comfortable with that the logical next step is to do it the way I did and do online courses to get a degree. So, I mean, do you need to go and sit in a class and live in a dorm and get drunk and you should do all that, but you're not going to have to.
I think there is a lot of qualities to college that get left behind. Some of the more studious people probably miss this, but this is probably kind of funny when you hear this coming from me. But I was incredibly introverted all my life. I was super awkward, didn't like talking to people until college, and then I started hanging out with more people. I started drinking a little bit, and I got really comfortable talking to people. I took a speech comm class, got comfortable speaking in front of people. And I came out of college a very, very different person than when I did going into it. And not only that, but it lets you network with a neat group of people. I had a hard time getting out of that too when I graduated college. I missed being around intelligent, motivated people because there's a lot of guys that just want to live for the weekend or whatever. And we
Yeah.
make fun of them all the time on Twitter. But
Mm-hmm.
even though in college we do like 100%, 52 weeks a year, live for the weekend, there are people that don't live for the weekend. There are people that have grand designs and big dreams, and a lot of those dreams get squashed. But at that time, there's this energy there, and it's infectious. And that's why I love this group of Twitter, because
Yeah.
I've got a lot of real life friends that, you know, they've got good jobs, they're working hard, but, you know, they don't want to do this kind of stuff. And because of the beauty of the internet, we've been able to network. And man, if you make fun of social media and you haven't given it a chance of like actually networking and actually like talking to people, and I don't mean just replying to somebody's tweet, but also like reaching out, like
Yep.
it's especially people like at the same level as you, if that makes any sense. Like you're both like kind of like in the same area trying to figure certain things out. It's super helpful.
Well, I think, you know, I'll kind of, you know, make the plug for, you know, the Aion group. But, you know, I look back and you see the stories that, you know, Ben Franklin's young days in Philadelphia and New York, you know, Ben Franklin created these groups at night of these friends, and it was basically I call it an intelligati. It's like an Illuminati, but but you sit around and it's a diverse background of trades and families and all this. But you sit in this room at night, and by the course of that, it was a bunch of men, but now it's a bunch of people, and you can have a somewhat civil discourse of events, and we talk things out just like we do on Aion. We've created and cultivated a group of people that we are all very, very diverse. We're all from different backgrounds. We're all of different things, but we can all sit and have a discussion and talk about things. And we may not agree with each other, but we do not get into the typical dumpster fire that social media can be.
Well, and that was one of the core tenets of Aion Media's intent, was to facilitate discourse, especially among people that disagree with each other. And there's a lot that most of us agree on, and there's things that we don't. And the neat thing is we just kind of accept it, you know. And sometimes we challenge those ideas. You know, I've changed my ideas and values over time a lot. I've become more open-minded with the age, and most people do.
Yep.
But I don't think people know exactly what Aion Media is, although it's becoming more well known, especially with the emails. And we're not going to explain exactly what this means yet, but it's growing a lot quicker than I anticipated, and that's going to become apparent within a few months.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's, you know, it's one of those things to where we're not a response to anything, you know. And that's, you know, when we talk amongst ourselves and we talk in the group, you know, I don't want people to get the impression that we are a response to 21 Con. We're not a response to Fraternity of Excellence. We're not a response to the War Room. Those folks are doing great. I mean, Hunter's doing great things.
Yeah.
You
definitely.
know, Anthony, he's got 21 Con, but, you know, it may not be my thing, but that's okay. I'm not going to sit here and shit all over it, because they're doing things that they want to do, and that's great. What they're doing is they're getting a message out. Same thing that we're doing, but we're not an answer to that. We are what we are. And I think what it is to, you know, is to kind of try to bring not just a narrow lane of focus, but kind of a wider beam of, hey, man, we've got enough people in this group that if you want to talk, you know, discipline, you know, honor, you know, old school stuff, well, there's me. You know, you have got a line on, you know, how to become a better, you know, truly a path to manliness, but investment ideas. You got Garrett, who's the philosopher king. You got young Benji. Well, okay, we don't know what Benji does yet. But, you know, you've got Cake and you got Allie who bring the feminine perspective, but with a lot of really strong professional credentials behind it. And so when you wrap, and you got, you know, Huntsman, who's, the king of logistics, that if we needed to get a dead body moved somewhere overnight, we're going to call him. But you have that diverse group that, whatever your flavor is, we've got it and we can talk to it. But then when it's all said and done, man, you got the fitness, from fitness to finance to philosophy to then there's me. I don't know exactly. I'm just the old grumpy guy on the porch yelling at kids to get off the lawn.
You're too hard on yourself. You teach people about honor. You teach people about experience with the Navy.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it is. I mean, you got,
there's plenty.
As I tell them, I'm the grandpa of that Aion. If you want I'm like those old dudes that you saw on the internet that went to a flea market and they set up that tent and they're like, free advice. It's probably shitty, but it's free. What do you want? That's me, man. I'm the old guy sitting at the flea market. I'll give you advice. It may be crap advice.
It's worth every penny.
Yeah, I tell you what, I'll give it to you for free, and if you're not satisfied, I'll double your money back that you paid in. No problem. So, that's just one of those things. But, and it's the fun side too. So, hey, look, man, I don't want to hold you up no longer tonight, man. I got to jump. I got to go to bed. It's 9:30, man.
I hear you, man.
People got to go to bed.
That sounds good.
Did we talk about sanction, though? We did talk about it. Okay. I don't have a copy to hold up.
I do, but
hold your copy up. Mine's on my Kindle.
Hang on.
Dude, I can't pick that book up, man.
It's heavy.
I had knee surgery and I got a hernia.
I've been training for Spartan races, so I'm ready to lift this up. Now, this is normally an auditory-only podcast, but maybe we'll put this one on the video. I've thought about putting some of these on video. Now, I would ask everybody before I put your particular episode up, by the way.
Yeah, you can put it. I don't give a shit. People have seen me before. But I tell you what,
don't
man,
care.
Where do you get done with that one? Because I'm already like 2 chapters into 2. Because I've already finished 1.
I'm struggling to get through it. I love it. I'm really into it. It's a big-ass book. And
it's daunting. I will say that.
I also have this weird habit. I don't know what it is with me, but whenever I read a book, I struggle to get through the first 100 pages. Right now I'm at 100 pages. And then I seem to fly through the rest of it. So I can already see them starting to pick up speed as I read it. So I think I'll get through it quicker now. But Sanction is by Roman McQuay, and it's kind of funny to talk about this because I can't remember the last time I felt like I was so in on the ground floor or something. But this is one of those books it's gonna be a big deal. It's not quite mass appeal yet, but you can tell it's getting bigger and bigger, and I know it's selling well.
The thing is about it, and it's funny because the connection between Roman and I started 4 months ago when I started reading Sanction, and I just happened to DM him one day, and without giving away too much, I just DM'd him, and I'm like, hey, I'd like to talk to you if you have a chance. I'd like to talk to you about the inmate's number. And he just kind of laughed, and he messaged me back. He goes, you're the first person to mention that. And so we had a conversation from that. And once you figure that out, as you read through Sanction 1, once you figure the significance of that, the book takes on, it's almost like it opens a subtext to the book that now you start seeing things inside the story that you didn't see before. And as you go forward, it plays out at the end and you understand. And Roman will tell you that he used to be hardcore atheist and he's not anymore. And I used to be very, I guess, agnostic to a while, and this is not hyperbole for the book or anything like that. The things that I picked up deciphering Sanction, it changed my mind about a lot of things in the universe because it caused me to do some research that led me to things that there's just no possible way that this is a fateful coincidence of a bunch of space dust that exploded one day. And the only clue I'll give to that is I did a very in-depth research study into Fibonacci sequence and I can't say anything else because that'll give away part of the book. But anyway, it'll lead you to things to where you start seeing that there really are, there's no way that certain things that are alike across different areas of the universe, that there's no way that that can be a coincidence. There's absolutely no possible way that that is a coincidence. So call it intelligent design, call it creator, call it God. I don't care what you call it, but
Yeah.
you have to reconcile with that.
Yeah, something I never really talked about this before. Something kind of guided me into this, and I don't really know how to explain it, but around the time of the lunar eclipse a couple years ago, I don't know what happened. It was like a weird shift happened to me, but I got really drawn to the pyramids and into
Mm-hmm.
different like numbers, and I started digging into this stuff. And this was before I knew any of you, before I even had a Twitter account, really. And I kept digging. I kept seeing these weird things. I started reading about it and writing about it, and it became this massive black hole. And there's some there's some weird truths out there when you look into these numbers, and there's a lot more to
Mm-hmm.
those pyramids than people think. When people say we
Mm-hmm.
can't just build, they're not just a stack of rocks.
Nope.
They're interesting, and it it makes you wonder when you start looking into that, and it leads you into it created Helm of Awesome first, and then this, and it kind of makes you wonder how I don't know. Like I said, it's whether you believe in God or not, or grand design, but there's powerful forces at play, I think, and I don't know how else to
The
describe it.
math of the pyramids will come into play during sanction as well.
Oh shit! Well, now I have to read this book. So, no, this is an incredible book. It's about
It is.
AI. It's about how it's warning humanity about AI, but it's about so much more. It's about
Yeah.
being a primal man. It's just, man, it's a fucking crazy book.
Yeah.
Almost every single page has at least one line that makes me just stop and think, "Holy
It
shit!" Or,
does. And you know what? When you get into two is a little, to me, honestly, and Roman will kill me for saying this, but two is a lot easier to read than one was. Um, I told Roman the other night, I was like, I think in two, I was like, I think you got your freaking weird thesaurus flex done in sanction one. I was like, sanction two, you kind of just, you got into the flow of the story pretty quick. And it's still, it's written just like one was, but it ties. After you get done reading one, when you read two, it's easier to start tying all the things together, and you get his flow, the way he writes his book. You know,
yeah, it's unique.
every chapter has like three almost like little mini chapters,
Yeah,
three storylines in each chapter, and he continues that in two. And it's, you know, we've almost, it's, well, we haven't almost, we have, you know, we've meaned this thing into something that is pretty wild.
yeah,
And but you know, it's, to me, it's a mark of, I love to read, and it's a mark of a great author when you can take 20 people, and 20 people can read this book and read the exact same story on the surface, but when they think about it, when their right brain starts digesting it, the left brain will read it the same, and we'll all read the same story about AI and this. But then when your right brain starts digesting it, we're all going to come up with 20 different things that we think it means and what he was really trying to tell us. And not to be overly, you know, crazy with this, but the last book that I read that did that same thing was the Bible. And I'm not here to say that Roman McClay is God or wrote another Bible, but I'm just saying
yeah.
that is the mark of a good author and a good storyteller.
It's funny you say that. I've been kind of hesitant to say, but there's a lot of things about that book that reminds me of the Bible, and I don't know of any other book that's made me feel that way before.
And it
It's
is. I mean, and that's just the mark of a great author.
Yeah, it's just an incredibly well written book, but it's also very unique and it's very different. It's a lot more depth and layers than most books that people are writing nowadays. I mean,
And I tell
it's
you,
it's impressive.
when Roman actually gets out and starts, if he ever gets out and starts meeting people, and the more people that get to meet him and talk to him,
I think he might.
I think it means it will tell you, it will tell you a lot more about the story. And then you almost start wondering, and he won't tell you because he didn't tell me, and I don't know that he's told anybody else. He won't give you the definitive yes or no as if this is an autobiography or not, but it's probably very close. But I think it's just a mix of, you know, again, it goes back to he figured out a story. He told a story, and that story touches people, no matter how it's crafted and constructed. You pick up these things. I mean, the very first opening line, and I've told so many people this that have asked me, what is sanction? And I'm like, I wrote it on my whiteboard at work the other day, and I'm like, all I want you to do is read this. I don't want you to say a word. I just want you to think about it. And I wrote down, pain demands a response. The very opening words of the book, pain demands a response. It'll move you.
Yeah.
You know, there is no wrong answer either, because you can get very deep. But Roman and I had this discussion. I was like, well, what if I get some jackass that goes, pain demands a response? Well, shit, ouch.
He's right.
He goes, they're not wrong. He goes, they're not wrong, are they? I'm like, no, they're not.
Yeah.
He goes, you just summed up sanction. Sanction is exactly as deep as you want it to be.
He's a fascinating guy.
He is, man. So it's a fascinating book. So, okay, so we spent the last 10 minutes selling books.
I also wrote a blog post about it. So
with no affiliate links. So
no, I am just intent on making it a thing, because I believe I think the world needs to read it.
Yeah.
Most of what I do is not motivated by money. I think people probably think that it is, but no, there's things I think the world needs to see, and there's things I think the world needs to know, and I'm intent on making it happen. So
you're right, man. Well, hey, man, thanks for having me tonight.
That was great, Chief.
This has been awesome, man. I enjoyed it.
Right?
Yeah,
you're easy to talk to. We'll do another one.
Well, I appreciate it, man.
I'm gonna try to start doing these a little bit more often, because I got like a list of people I want to talk to, but at some point it's probably go through the Aion guys again, because I got more things I want to talk about. Well,
yeah, man, let's do it. Next time you need somebody to fill in entertainment, let me know, man. I'm here. I always got something to talk about.
Yeah, you're not kidding. No, I appreciate it. I love your emails. We'll link that down below too. So Aion Media emails, they're pretty awesome. So
yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Path to Manliness. Thanks again. I mean, for real, this is
cool.
This is like one of the better ones. I mean, they've all been really good, but this has been really, really informative. I think a lot of young guys are gonna get a lot out of it. I just want you to understand that. So
thank you.
Thanks,
man.
Josh.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Path to Manliness signing off.